Welcome to your second lesson in web design. In this video, we're going to focus on working with the text in a web page. And to get started, you're going to need to download this lesson2.txt file and have that available to you. This is the text of the web page that we're going to be putting in and then surrounding with markup tags. So this will help speed things along. You won't have to type it all out, but you will need to edit it. And then after this video, you're going to complete the Lesson 2 video assessment that is located right here. Let's begin by opening up Aptana. And where we left off was we created a project for Lesson 1. Let's shrink that up right now and select File System. And we're going to create a new web project. Now, another way to get there would be to click this button in the upper left-hand corner and just select Web Project. It's the second one down. That's my preferred approach. And we're going to call this Lesson 2. So I'm going to put Lesson 2 in here, and then if you want to change the save location, you can uncheck this box. I'm going to leave it as is and click Finish. Okay, so we have a blank Lesson 2 folder for all of our Lesson 2 files. So what we want to create next is a basic file. So I'm going to click this shortcut button right here and then open up a new file. And we have to make sure that we are making it in the Lesson 2, not the Lesson 1 folder. So make sure that you have Lesson 2 selected, and we're going to give it a file name. Let's just call it lesson2.html. And click Finish. All right, so we have a blank HTML page here. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and create the other two files that we are going to need as well. We're going to need a file for lesson2.css, so that's going to be our styles. And we're going to need a file for our lesson2.js. All right, so these are the three files that we are going to use in this website. Now let's go ahead and create a basic HTML structure. I'm going to move along a little bit quicker in this video because some of these things were explained in Lesson 1. But once again, the very first line in your HTML document is going to be the doc type declaration. So the minute I put in a left angle bracket, it wants to predict the doc type. So I'm going to push tab to autocomplete, and we're going to make this an HTML5 document by just typing HTML. On the very next line, this was called the root of the document. And I'm just going to call this HTML, and that gives me the opening and closing tags. Now, I'm going to separate this out by putting in a lot of extra white space in here. And then the HTML tags, the opening and the closing, are going to contain two main sections, the head and the body. So let me go ahead and start making the head. So there's the head. If I move down here, this is the body. So what this section tells us is about the web page. So this tells the computer about the web page. And then everything in the body tags, everything between the opening and closing body tag, displays content on the page. So that's the purpose of those two. I'm going to clean up the extra white space now. And let's add in our meta tag. So the meta tag is necessary for us to validate without an error. So we're going to put in car set equals UTF-8. And we're going to close that. It's a self-closing tag. On the very next line, we're going to make a page title. So we're going to call this one Working with Text as the page title. And we're going to leave a space in here for when we actually reference our CSS file. So before we do that, let's go ahead and make sure that our page is working and paste in our text from our downloaded file. So back on Schoology, you can just click on this. I'm going to click Download File. It's going to pop up in my browser. And I'm going to go ahead and open it. And here's all the text. I can click the Edit menu and select All. There's a shortcut. You can just push Control-A. And I'm going to copy this. I don't need it anymore, so I can go ahead and close it. And I'm going to paste it in the body. Paste. So this is all the text that's going to save you some time of typing it all out. Let's go ahead and save the web page and now preview it. And you can see how the text all runs together. And that's because this text becomes part of the flow content. So we want to reorder this content in the way that we want it to flow. So let me go ahead and close the browser, and we're going to start putting in HTML tags. The first element that we can add into this page is called the H1 tag. The H1 would go here. It's basically going to be our title to the page. So I'm going to add H1 right here. It adds the opening tag immediately after, so I'm going to highlight all of it, and I'm going to click and hold in the highlighted portion, and then just drag it to the end. Alternatively, you could delete it and just write it down at the end. So this is going to make the H1 stand out in our page. To see this, I'm going to save it right here, and then click my preview button right here. And here you can see working with HTML now stands apart from the text instead of part of it. Now I'm going to move this preview out to the side until I see the vertical bar going up and down my page right here. All right, so there's my H1. Let's add an H2 to where it says paragraphs, H2. And I'm just going to click drag and hold and bring that to the end. And then I have a whole paragraph of text. So a paragraph is made with the P tag, and this is where it begins, so let's move the ending of this to right here. All right, now let's go ahead and save this again, and here you can see this begin to separate. This text right here that says this is an example of pre-formatted text is different. Paragraph text is going to adapt to the width of the browser. Here you can see the text shrinks and grows. It wraps to the next line if it doesn't fit here at the end. Pre-formatted text is going to be different. It will be preserved exactly as we want it to be. So over here on this side, I'm going to put in a tag called PRE, which is just representative of pre-formatted text. In other words, I want to preserve all of the white space from here to here, and from here to here, and from here to here. Otherwise, the browser shrinks all white space down to one white space, and that's why we get that wrapping effect over here. So let me go ahead and click Save again, and here you can see that this text preserves the way that it's formatted over here. Okay, next up we have the quotations. This is going to be our H3. So I'm going to put an H3 right there, our third heading, and I'm going to move the closing tag to the end. And we also have another paragraph. So here I'm going to have an opening paragraph tag and a closing paragraph tag, and this is going to go down to right here. All right, so let me go ahead and click Save, and here you can see this pop out right here. What we have next now is a block quote. So a block quote represents a large quotation. So I'm going to just autocomplete here, block quote, and I'm going to move the end tag down to here. Now if I push save, we can see the block quote pop in, and below it we have lists. So lists is actually going to be our H4, so I'm going to add H4 and move its closing tag to the end of lists. And beneath that we have a paragraph, so I'm going to add the P tag and move its end tag to the bottom of that particular block. Now if I go ahead and click save, you can see lists pops in as an H4, and this paragraph separates from this list of planets, which brings us to the list. So I'm going to add a little bit of extra space at the bottom to push this up, make it easier to see. And what we have here is we have a bulleted list, but minus the bullet points. So we're going to add those in. It's called an unordered list. That's abbreviated UL. So UL means bullet point list. And I'm going to go ahead and move this end tag. Oops. I'm just going to highlight everything and move it to the end. Now inside this UL, I have that list. And I just selected everything and hit Tab to push it over. And actually, I have a list like this and another list like that. And we're going to put bullet points next to these. To put a list item in, that's the abbreviation LI. So I'm going to put an LI right here, but I'm going to delete its closing tag. And I need to do that to make a second bullet point list underneath. So I'm going to put one here, and I'm going to put one here. Now the HTML parser is going to understand that if I have an LI and it gets to another LI, that's the beginning and ending. So let me go ahead and push save right now. And here you can see I've got inner planets and I have outer planets. And because I have nothing but white space in between, it actually thinks this is all one list item. So to begin separating them out, I'm going to add an additional UL element, which means unordered list, inside of it. And that's called nesting. So a UL, I accidentally created an extra tag there. I'm going to take this end tag, move it to here. And actually, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and click Format just to clean this up a little bit. And here's the result. Now I'm going to add additional LIs for each one of these planets. So I'm going to move this to the end. And just move down the list like so. Now normally I would be typing this in as I create this, but I provided all the text for you so that all you had to do was add the markup to the text. So this is a slightly different approach, but it reinforces here that we are building the structure of the page with our HTML. So now if I click Save, you can see the effect over here is the inner planets now have an additional sublist of Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars, and we're going to do the same thing with the outer planets. So I'm going to begin by clicking right after outer planets, adding a line, and then adding the UL tag to have my sublist. So my sublist begins here and ends right after Neptune. And then all I got to do is add in the LIs for Jupiter, Uranus, and Neptune. So LI, move the end tag to right after, and repeat that. And the last one will go right here. And again, I'm going to use that format feature just to clean that up. So under source, I'm going to click format, and here you can see it's listing it and reformatting it to be a little bit more readable. I'm going to go ahead and click save. So now the end result of the bulleted list over here, it looks like this. So we've nested one bulleted list inside of another bulleted list to create those headings or that effect of having a inner planet and outer planet heading, and it's very common to do. So the next thing is what have we done up to this point? We have marked off each of these sections of the page with these markup tags and created block level content. So instead of everything being collapsed down to a single text paragraph, each one of these tags creates a block. So this entire line is one block. And then each additional tag that we added stacked below the previous block. So it recognized that we want to keep basically this entire block together. We want to keep this entire block together, which was the pre-formatted. And then as we marked off each section, they just kept stacking and stacking and stacking. It doesn't matter what size or what width this window is, those blocks stay together and they stack one on top of the other. So keep that in mind, and now we're going to focus on some inline things that we can do. So that means in between these block level elements, we're going to add some markup. So the first thing I'd like to show you are some escape characters. So for instance, an escape character is a sequence of things that a sequence of characters that we put together to display things that are hard to show. For instance, what if we wanted to put an angle bracket on this page? That might force, for instance, if I put an angle bracket right before this P in paragraph, you can see that it starts to cause an error. It's because it thinks we're about to put in a markup tag. So how do I get an angle bracket to appear on this page? Well, we basically have to use an escape sequence, and that tells the computer this is meant to be a character to be displayed. It's not meant to be a markup tag. So the first place that occurs is right here, where we want to display this letter P as a markup tag that means paragraph. So right here, I'm going to put an ampersand, which is a Shift 7 on your keyboard. And here you can see a whole bunch of things start to pop up because these are going to be all of the different escape characters that we can possibly use. And what we want here is a less than. So if I put LT, it's the symbol for less than, and then I have to finish out with a semicolon. So now, if I were to save this, here, watch this over here in the preview pane, right there. I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And now you can see the actual effect over here is that the less than symbol is now displayed next to the letter P. So what are some other escape sequences and how do we find them? Well, anytime you actually type the letter ampersand, your escape sequence is going to come up, but you may not know what you're looking for here. So you can actually Google escape sequences for HTML and you'll come to a page like this. And basically what you're looking for is these either number codes or more typically you'll run into the same situation again and again where you need to have the ampersand, which is that character right there, or a quotation mark entered in. So these two actually have their own named escape sequences, and the rest of them are all numbered. So let's go ahead and add a few more. So on the other side of this letter P, we want ampersand GT for greater than. And then over here, we want to add a less than and a semicolon next to the BR. And we also want to put in space. And then I want to put in a forward-leaning slash. Now, I don't have that memorized off the top of my head, so I'm going to go ahead and look up that chart again. And the slash uses this escape sequence. I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to put it into my HTML and then add a greater than symbol immediately following it. So now if I go ahead and push save, you can see that this looks like an HTML tag and this displays as an HTML tag. So this here is a paragraph and this means line break. Okay, now the next sentence in our little web page here talks about how to make text bold, italicized, and underlined. So we're going to demonstrate that by adding the HTML. So to make text bold, you can actually add the B tag. So I'm going to go ahead and just add that right here. Click Save, and here that makes this text bold. And it's made with the letter B. So let's go ahead and escape a less than symbol right there. And on the other side, we're going to put the greater than, GT, semicolon. And when I click Save, now this looks like the B tag, and it's showing bold text right there. And the same thing is true for italicized. So over here, to italicize something, I can put the letter I in angle brackets. So when I save this, this text right here is italicized. And I'm going to add the escape sequence here, less than and ampersand greater than. So that's going to add the angle brackets in the preview pane right there. And we've got one more right here. We've got the underline tag. So I guess I'm going to add a U tag right here. Move it to right after the word underline. And when I save that, you can see this text over here gets underlined. And the tag for it needs to be shown. So we're going to put LT. And we're going to put in the GT right there. All right, now save that. And here we're showing the tags that are associated with the actions. Now, CSS is actually the preferred way of underlining and putting in bold text and italicizing things, but it can still be achieved with the HTML elements B, I, and U if we wanted to do it by hand and override it. But it's definitely something that is what's called deprecated. It's the old way of doing things, and it's been replaced with a better way of doing it, and that's with CSS. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the escape sequences to these other paragraphs, and then I'll pause the video and you can add those in as to where they go, and then we'll have the entire page marked up. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and fast forward the video to show you where the additional escape sequences and inline tags will go. Okay, I've gone through and I've added the additional escape sequences for the remaining parts of the page. So let me just point out a few of the ones that I added after those initial ones. I added the less than and greater than before this pre. There was actually 2 of those. I also cleaned up some of the tab and indentation issues that I saw earlier. You can add as much space between these as you want. Remember, the compiler is going to compress it down to just 1 anyway, so whatever is the most readable for you, that's what you really want. So I did clean up a little bit of this. And then down in this paragraph, you have basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 escape sequences to add. And down in the last paragraph down here, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to fill in. Next up, we're going to add some additional markup and add the styles to the page. Okay, let's scroll to the top of the page and let's put all of our CSS style rules in this lesson2.css file. So to do that, we have to link to it. So in that head section, basically on line 7 here, I'm going to put link and then space REL, which means the relationship between this link and that document is it's a style sheet. So I'm going to say REL equals double quotes style sheet. And then I'm going to push space, and the type of file that we're going to be talking about equals text/CSS. So what that means is we're going to type it out as text, but to the computer it's CSS. And then I'm going to put in an href, which means where it can find this file that we're talking about, and it's sitting right next to the other file, so we can just give it a relative link. So when I put the double quotes, it'll pop up, and I can just select lesson2.css, and it fills it in when I click tab. Then I'm going to close it out and save it. Now we can go ahead and just start typing in our lesson 2 CSS, and this will be where we manage all of the styles of the page. So before we begin, let's go ahead and just preview it. I can click this preview button right here, and this is what our page looks like so far. Let me go ahead and just drag this to the side again and go over to the lesson2.css, and let's first start with adding a background to the page. So to do that, the displayed portion of the page is all within the body tag. So I'm going to type the word body, and with a left-facing curly brace and a right-facing curly brace, I'm going to separate the beginning and end of this style rule. Now I can use the word background to specify the type of background I want. But for someone new to web design, you might not know what to put here. So we would want to go look this up using our reference guide just to know what to do next. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to open up the web design tools on Schoology and open up CSS Reference Guide. So I'm going to go ahead and open up that in a new tab and click on that tab. And here we have everything that we can do with CSS. In this case, I'd like to put on a background, but I'm not sure exactly what kind of background I want to put. So I'm just going to kind of shop around in here and see what I can do. Well, let's just click on this one. I see that there's a ton of other things I can do with background, but I'm going to click on this one. This one is basically the root element, the default one. And here it shows me an example of adding a smiley.gif to a background. If I clicked on try it yourself, this would show me the result. There's this little smiley image in the middle. Not what I'm looking for. But it does also tell me in here let me try to find the syntax. Oh, here it is. CSS syntax. This is what I'm meant to put in anytime I use the term background. It needs a color or an image with a position and size, whether or not to repeat that image over and over, etc. What I can tell you is kind of neat is the stuff that's in CSS 3, which is the current version of CSS. I'm going to go ahead and click that down here, CSS 3 backgrounds. And here we're getting a little more fancy. Here you can see the flowers with this, looks like crumbled paper background. And as I scroll down the page, it shows more interesting things. I can actually have multiple backgrounds. That's kind of neat. I can change the background size. I could put the image behind the text. I can resize that image and kind of make like a page header out of it. So this is getting closer to what I might want for this particular web page. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and see what else there is. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and click on the next chapter. And here it takes me to colors. So maybe we want a full page one block color behind it. And here it tells me how to work with colors. It looks like I have to specify an RGBA if I wanted a color. That stands for red, green, and blue. That's the mixture that I can mix together and blend together colors. And I've shown in class how to use a color picker such as this one. And if I just click on color picker, you can see that I'm blending together these colors here, and it actually shows the RGB over here, and the A stands for transparency. So I have an amount of red, amount of green, an amount of blue, and then A stands for alpha, and alpha means transparency. So scrolling through this page, you can see different ways to make colors. But if I go to the next page, this is the one that I think I want right here, and that is CSS Gradients. I really like how this fades in, so I'm going to basically use that in my background here, and it's called a linear gradient. So it looks like most browsers support it. So these are all the browsers that will allow me to use a gradient, and that's basically all the major browsers today. So now I need to know how to do it. Well, under the syntax headings, this tells you how to write out one of those. I basically need to specify the word background, which I already typed in, and then say linear gradient, and then tell it what direction do I want to draw it in. Do I want top to bottom, like shown right here, or do I want left to right, like this one right here? There's even others down below here that I know about. This one's diagonal, so top left to bottom right. Here's another one that's kind of reversed in order, and then you can actually do this, which is kind of neat, using multiple color stops, both top and bottom and left to right. So let's go ahead and use one of the simple ones up top. So what I can do two things. I can actually copy and paste in some of this text right here and use that. Or I can get more specific and try to create one of my own. So I think what I'm going to do is, let me see what that green one looked like up here. Kind of like that. So basically I need the direction and the color stop. So let's go ahead and just make it ourselves. Let me go back to Aptana. So the next word we had to type was linear dash gradient. And then in parentheses, we're going to put 3 values. So I'm going to put 0 degrees, 0 DEG, separated by a comma. Basically that means top to bottom. And then I'm going to use white and gray. And I'm going to see how that looks. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And let me preview this in the browser. So I'm going to click this, click that. And here you can see that I have a gradient from top to bottom. However, there's one thing. The background repeats. And the background actually ends right here. I want it to extend from the top of the browser all the way to the end of the browser. That is called the height of the document. So I'm going to have to specify that next. So, and I don't want the background to repeat. So there is actually a background dash repeat property. And when I start typing no, it gives me a suggestion of no dash repeat. So I'm going to go ahead and take that. And I want the height of the document to extend 100%. So here I'm saying that the body element will stretch from the very top that you see here to the very bottom. Now, let me go ahead and save this. And I don't think that the preview in Aptana shows the CSS. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this right now. And then we're going to have to look at the CSS from the Google Chrome browser. So I'm going to go ahead and push play. I have to push play when I'm on the HTML document, so I'm going to go ahead and click that. And here now you can see it extend from top to bottom, and that's much better. So now let me go ahead and close these, and let's just keep working in CSS. So the other thing that I might want to do is specify what font family I want to use. Perhaps this text. Let me go back to this page, and here I actually can use the preview. This is kind of clunky, so I'm going to use a different font face, and the way that works is you say font-family, and you can give as many different font families as you want, but the order that you specify matters. So what it means is that if I put Tahoma first, that is my #1 preferred font. So if the browser has that, which means the computer that's actually viewing the web page has the font Tahoma, it'll use it. But if it doesn't have it, then we can substitute in other ones that we might like, such as Geneva. That would be my #2 preference. And if that's not available, I'm just going to use a sans serif font. So let me go ahead and save this, and I'll show you what it looks like now. All right, so this is much better. The difference between what I had, which was a serifed font, looks like it's chiseled into a web page. It looks very much like it was written back in the 15th century, right off of a printing press. Whereas this one is a sans serif font, which means it doesn't have those little chisel marks in the corner, and it's easier for actually to read on the screen. So I like the way that looks. So we're going to choose that. Now it might be a little hard to see, but there's actually a thin margin around the border of this. You can see this little white space. I'm going to go ahead and set margin to 0 in our CSS. So margin : 0. And that'll take away any border that we have. And the other thing that I noticed when I loaded this page, let me go ahead and show you again, is the text is pressed right up against the edges, and that doesn't look good at all. So let me actually expand this out. Let's push the text inside this little box. That's called the padding. So everything sits within an invisible box, and if we stuff it with padding, almost like we were wrapping up a present for somebody's birthday and stuffed it with extra padding, we can do the same thing with the text. So I'm going to go ahead, let me just close that tab too, I don't need it anymore. I'm going to say the padding is going to be 5 pixels. I can make this a little bit bigger to make it more dramatic, but let me show you what this does. So now I've pushed in the text a little bit. Let me push it in a lot more so you can see a more drastic look. If I push it in, let's say 50 pixels, take a look at how that looks. Here you can see a lot more space to the left and to the right. As a matter of fact, there's even more space on the top as well, and the bottom. So around all the text, there's more space. As I change this page, the padding still stays the same. So that's another thing. Okay, another thing that we might want to do is make the text color a little different. So let's go ahead and change the text color of the headings, and we're going to make those pop out. And I think that we're going to add a drop shadow to these headings as well. So we're going to make those pop out. So let's go back to our CSS file, and we can actually group together all the headings together like this: H1, H2, H3, and H4. So separating them by a comma, we can add the same style to all of these H1s. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to set their margin to 0. Actually, it's going to be the margin on the bottom of them to 0 pixels, which means I don't want any extra space that is added by default usually. If I show you that web page, there's a little bit of space under each one. I'm going to take that away. So I'm going to say 0 pixels. When I go ahead and save this and reload the web page, you can see it shrinks a little bit. Okay, so we're going to take away some of that ballooning effect that takes place with these headings. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the color white. So let's go ahead and save this and view that in the browser and reload it. And here that pops, but with the fade going on, by the time you get down to list, this is a little hard to see. So I think it'll look better if we put a shadow behind it and make it look a little bit more three-dimensional. So let's look that up in our CSS reference. Let's go back to our web design tools. We'll go to CSS reference guide, and let's search for text shadow. All right, CSS3, text shadow property. Yep, that's probably what we want. All right, so here it's showing us an example of how to use it in an H1, coincidentally. And let's see what this means. Let's go down to its definition and usage. Text shadow property adds a shadow to the text. Yes, that's what we want. And its syntax here is the horizontal shadow, then the vertical shadow, then a blur radius, and then a color. So let's see here. We got to put this, this is the horizontal and this is the vertical. Those are required. We don't have to put the blur radius, and the color is actually optional too. So we do have to put the shift, but okay, so we're probably going to build this by hand. So right underneath color in our CSS properties, we're going to say text-shadow, and we'll use their 2 pixel example. So 2 pixels horizontally, and then 2 pixels vertically, and then we're just going to say black as the color. You know what, let's add a blur now that I'm thinking about it. So 2 pixels of blur, and then black. So let's go ahead and push save and see how this looks. So I'm going to go back to this and just click refresh, and in pops our shadows. And that looks like it's a little easier to read to me. So we're going to keep that shadow. And now let's go ahead and we'll format the block quote. So let's go ahead and add the block quote underneath that. So for block quote, we can select the block quote by just saying block quote, that's the element title, with a beginning and ending rule, with the left facing and right facing curly brace. The font that we're going to use is going to be 14 pixels. And when I put a slash, this is going to be the line height. So this is px, and then we're going to use normal spacing followed by Helvetica as the font. But if that's not available, we'll use sans serif. Okay, around the block quote, we're going to add some margin. So here I'm going to say the top margin, that's the space above the block quote, is going to be 10 pixels. And then the bottom, the margin bottom, is going to have a space of 10 pixels. And the margin left is going to have a space of 60 pixels. And the margin, that's it. So we're going to have that, plus we're going to have a little padding to the left, because I'm going to make some of the characters larger, so 10 pixels. I think we're also going to add a border to it. We're going to say border left is going to be 2 pixels wide. It's going to be solid, and you have options of making it like solid or dashed, things like that, and it's going to be black. So let's go ahead and see what we did there. I'm going to go ahead and click Save, and when I refresh, there's a nice thin line here next to the block quote to make it stand out. And let's now style this list down here with Roman numerals. All right, so let's go ahead and add a few Roman numerals to this. We're going to say that UL for unordered list is going to have the following rules. It's going to say list-style type is upper dash Roman. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and click Save, and I'm going to refresh, and here I have Roman numerals now. Okay, so those styles that I just flew through, I was able to look all those up by simply just going to the Css Reference, and then I just kind of perused these categories until I found the ones that I wanted. For instance, text effects were in here. If I wanted to change the border of something, I would look in here. So it's just a matter of getting used to looking up what you need in one of these. For instance, here's the lists. So if I click on list properties, here was the list style and list style type that you could go into. Okay, so let's return to the HTML and let's make the first letter in each paragraph pop out to be extra large. So to do that, we're going to add another inline style called a span. So I'm going to put span, which is a way to add a specific style to an inline element. So we're going to say class equals first character. So the first character in each one of these paragraphs we're going to make really large. So I'm going to take this end tag and put it on the other side of this capital W right here. So let's just focus on this one for now, and then we're going to add it to the additional ones. So over in the CSS, let's add a final rule called first character. All right, so this is a class, so it starts with a dot. And here it already detects it in the document, so I'm going to just autocomplete to make sure that the spelling is correct. And I'm going to float this to the left. That means I want the character to automatically move to the left of the document, and the text is going to float around it. Its font size is going to be 75. So that means generally over an inch tall. 72 pixels is usually about an inch. So we're going to say 75 pixels, and its line height, line dash height is going to be 60 pixels. I have to give it some padding on the top, and that's going to be 4 pixels. Padding on the right, which is going to be 10 pixels. Padding on the left, 5 pixels. And its font family, we're going to change to Georgia. I misspelled font family. Anytime you see a rule in black, it generally means that you misspelled something. So I was able to identify that relatively quickly because of the colors in Aptana. All right, let's make the color of this character red, and we're going to give it a text shadow, just like we did above. So that rule, we're going to do about the same thing, 2 pixels by 2 pixels by 2 pixels. So that's the vertical, the horizontal, or I think it was the horizontal, the vertical, and then the blur. And then we're going to make the back color of the shadow black. Let's go ahead and save this and see how it looks. All right, so that looks really nice. All right, so we're going to do this same text effect with the other paragraphs as well. We'll make this T and this T pop out so that it has that much more elegant look to it. Okay, so let me just copy what we have here and then paste over top of the T and then just change one letter, the W to a T. And then down here, we have one more right here. So I'm going to go ahead and paste over top of that T and change the W to a T, save it, and I close that out. So I'm going to have to push play again. So play. Okay, and here I have that same exact text effect. All right, so here I've just made the text fancy. We've added a background to the page. Lastly, we're going to add a little bit of JavaScript and just for good measure and put a button in this page. So now let's add a button to the bottom of the page, and the purpose of that button is going to change the style of this unordered list from Roman numerals to bullet points to all the available styles that a list can have. So let's go ahead and add that button. It's just the button tag, and its type is going to be a generic button. We're going to add an on-click event so that when the button is clicked, it's going to change the style. So that's going to be the name of the method that we're going to add. And then when we name it, we also have to include the parentheses. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. And then we're going to have the closing tag, but in between the opening and the closing tag, we're going to put the text that will actually display in the button. So we're just going to put click me! Exclamation point. All right, so our button tag now looks like this. And then the link to our JavaScript goes right before the closing body tag, as I said in the first tutorial. So I'm going to put script, and the type here that we're talking about is going to be text, but interpreted as JavaScript. And this can be found using the source tag. So the source is going to equal, and in double quotes, we're going to put lesson2.js, which pops up in my Italicized here. So I'm going to go ahead and tab autocomplete, and then I'm going to close the script tag like this. All right, so the next thing is this JavaScript is going to need IDs on our list to refer to different parts of it. So I added one already right here. So we're going to identify the inner part of the planets by saying the ID of this unordered list is called inner. And right here, I'm going to add another one. I'm going to ID this as outer. Now the whole list, I also want to reference that as well. and I'm going to ID that as the solar system. This is a lowercase s to start and an uppercase to start the second word. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And then I've also already added in all the JavaScript here. So this would be a good time to pause the video and go ahead and type this in, and I will explain it here. Now, at the top, we have 3 variables, my list, the inner planets, and outer planets, that go and find those elements in our list. Then I create a style array. Now, an array means a collection of things. So these are the different styles that the list can take on. It can look like a disk, it can look like a circle, it can look like a square, and all of these other things. So this is what's going to change the look of our unordered list, and I need to keep track of which one it's displaying. So I'm going to start at 0, and I'm going to have this list keep iterating through each one of these possibilities until it gets to this one. When it gets to this one, we're going to start back at the beginning of the list. So this is that method that I just referenced in the HTML page called changeStyle, and it sets it equal to, basically makes our style be whatever we are currently displaying. So if we're first showing the disk, it'll show the disk. And then it's going to say the next one is going to be whatever my current index is, which if it's 0, the next one will be element 1. So that's what this does, is it increments my index by 1 every time. And then when I reach the end of the list, this checks to see if the current style that I'm on is the end of the array. So I can look at this list and say, hey, there's basically 3, 5, 7, 9 elements. If I've reached the 9th one, then reset my index back at 0. And that takes me back to the beginning, so the list repeats. So the effect is if I push play and I click this button, I am now looping through that list all the way back to the beginning. So I can just keep clicking this forever and ever, and you can see the different styles available to the unordered lists. So now that we've come to the end of lesson 2, this is a complete tutorial of how to work with text in a page, and we can now turn this in. So again, the procedure to do that is to go back to Aptana. You're going to right-click on your project folder, which in this case is lesson 2, and you will say Show in Windows Explorer, or if you're on the Mac, you'll say Show in Finder. And that's going to bring up the file folder that this belongs to. And you're going to right-click on that folder, and you're going to say Send to Compressed Zipped Folder. And this is what it says on the PC. On the Mac, it will say Compress. So we're going to click on that, and then you'll create a compressed folder that has a look like this, and put your last name on that folder. Then you're going to take that folder to Schoology. So here's Schoology. You're going to open up your lesson, and I'm in the teacher view, so this isn't going to be exactly the same, but there's a button in there that says Submit Assignment. You're going to click on the File button and upload your zip file, and that has your complete project. Once you've done that, you can complete the Lesson 2 video assessment on the ideas and the concepts and techniques that we went over in this video.